Hello and welcome to my Season 2 Reina guide. Now I've been playing Reina since December of 2024 and I recently promoted her to God of Destruction, so I know a fair bit about this character. The purpose of this guide is twofold. Firstly, to help players who are interested in picking up Reina to get up to speed, and secondly, to help intermediate and maybe even advanced level players to level up their game just a little bit. What you can expect is firstly an overview of the character, some of her strengths and weaknesses, beginner concepts like punishment and a basic neutral game, intermediate level stuff like how to apply her stances effectively, and some more esoteric knowledge that I've picked up over playing this character for so long. At the end of the video, I will also showcase some combos, both to help you get started and also maybe some combos you might not have seen before. All of what I just said will be timestamped below, so feel free to jump back and forth as you see fit. I'm making this guide under the assumption that you have an understanding of Tekken's notation and frame data. Right now I will have a notation card on the screen. With all that being said, let's get started. So what kind of character is Reina? I would say she's a highly versatile character because she has one of the longer move lists in the game, and this allows you to play her in a variety of styles. Whether you enjoy poking, whether you enjoy playing like a Mishima, or whether you enjoy stance trickery, she's got all of that. Do note that if you stick to any singular style, you will find yourself hitting a wall at some point, especially against characters that are better at certain things. While she does have good pokes, characters like Dragunov will outpoke her. While she does have Mishima tools, the other Mishimas have better Mishima tools. And while she does have stance trickery, other characters like Xiaoyu have better stances. Similar to Jin in a sense, she is a jack of all trades, but not necessarily a master of any one of them. So I would recommend that you at least gain some level of competence in all of these areas. Her main strengths lie in her punishment, her mix-up game especially, and her movement is pretty decent too. Her main weakness is linearity, so you will have to employ techniques like delayed timing and realignment to make sure that your opponent doesn't constantly evade your moves. Reina does have high damage potential, however a lot of this is locked behind execution, particularly in the Electric Wind God Fist. I might be missing a few things here and there, but I'm trying to keep things concise, so let's move on to the next section, which is punishment. For her 10 frame punish, you have two options. You have 112, which is hit confirmable, and I would suggest always hit confirming this as there is a pretty large window to do so. It goes into Sentai at plus 11 on hit, or you can cancel the transition by holding back after it connects, but canceling the transition is more useful at the wall, where the opponent is wall crushed and Reina is plus 14 in their face. Secondly, you have 122, which is neutral on hit. However, it can transition into Unsoku by holding either down or up upon landing the move. Her 12 frame punish, 221, is a hit confirmable move that is knockdown on hit and also wall splats. For 13 frames, you can do down forward 1-2 for a heat engage, 28 damage, and wall splats. If you are particularly sweaty, you can do a 13 frame electric to launch too. She does have a 14 frame punish in 2 slide 1, where she gets a guaranteed CD3 as a follow-up, but I don't use this one very often. I would much rather either take my heat engage or attempt an electric launch. For 15 frames, she has down forward 2, which has pretty long range as you can see, but I would recommend practicing electric launch as it does more damage. For moves with pushback, you have two choices. Depending on the distance, you will most likely just go for forward 2 into Sen 3, or forward 2-3 also has decent range. That is a 13 frame move that can transition into Sentai. For crouching punishment, 10 frame is a down jab like pretty much everyone else. 11 frame is while standing 4-4, -1 on hit, however, by holding down you can transition into Heaven's Wrath at +6. Her 13 frame, while standing 1, goes into Sentai at +13, which either guarantees a Sen 3 or a Sen 2, depending on whether you want a heat engage or a mix-up. Reina technically has a 14 frame while rising punisher in while standing 3+4, however as you can see its range is quite short. But if you do land it, it is +14 on hit, which gives you a guaranteed forward 2, but you have to be very fast with it. If you're not fast with forward 2, forward 2-3 is also acceptable. Near the wall, this has much less pushback, and you can even land a down forward 1-2 into a full wall combo. For some of the sweats, do note that she can electric directly from crouch because of her little parry missed step kind of thing when you tap forward. Her 15 frame crouching launcher is full crouch down forward 4, and for stagger lows you would want to use full crouch down forward 3. This does 5 more damage than full crouch down forward 4. If you're near the wall and you block a move that's minus 15, it is advisable to use while standing 3-4 instead, as you get a clean wall splat. Moving on to Reina's neutral game, I would say that a very good game plan is to annoy the hell out of the opponent with all of her mids and highs and poking and chip damage and all that stuff so that they don't block low, because a lot of her lows carry quite a lot of risk. The only low that Kazuya cannot launch is forward neutral 4. The rest are minus 13 or more. Speaking of her lows, I'll start off with down back 2, which is a 20 frame, 22 damage move. Minus 3 on hit, however, this frame situation is exactly the same as when you do down forward 1 on block. So don't be afraid to throw this one out when the opponent is clearly not ducking. Another very good low poke is down back 4, very fast at 16 frames, and especially near the end of rounds, useful to let the string extension down back 4 1+2 rip, because it often catches people trying to punish the low. This is not guaranteed on normal hit and you are left at minus 12, however, it is guaranteed on counter hit and somewhat hit confirmable too. Near the wall, this is especially useful because it provides a clean wall splat. Sidestep 4 is one of her more powerful low pokes, as it is relatively safe at minus 13 on block, neutral on hit, and does 17 damage. Since it comes out of a sidestep, it is also highly delayable, and is effectively mixed with forward 4, just to keep the opponent from ducking. Sidestep 4 also stuns the opponent briefly on counter hit, leaving Reina at plus 13. Her most powerful low is of course Hell Sweep. Now, she has two options. She can either do CD4-2 and go into Heaven's Wrath at plus 6, or if you choose not to go into Heaven's Wrath, it's minus 1 on hit, or she can do CD4-4, which is plus 2 and leaves both her and the opponent crouching. Do note that CD4-2 is incredibly linear. However, CD4-4 is essentially homing. Up next we have forward neutral 4, which is a high crushing low added in season 2, transitions into Sentai at plus 3, or you can cancel the transition by holding back, which leaves her neutral on hit. This move also guarantees either Sen 2 or Sen 3 on counter hit. As part of her poking game, she has down forward 1, very good mid poke at only minus 3 on block, which also has two extensions, down forward 1-1, which is a high, that's minus 4, and down forward 1-2, which is a heat engager, but it is minus 14, so beware Brian, Lars, and Mishima's on amphetamines. Down forward 1 is plus 4 on hit, with the extension being plus 7 on hit, which puts you in a very good frame position. Forward neutral 3 is also a very good move to throw out in neutral. It's plus 4 on normal hit, only minus 6 on block with a bit of pushback, and if the opponent presses, it's a counter hit launch. CD3 is also a very good move to throw out in neutral, as it knocks down on normal hit and is also a counter hit launcher. If you have the Mishima execution, you can also mix it up by either throwing out Electric Wind Godfist or CD3 by itself. Do note that CD3 is minus 9 on block when you do the electric version. However, if it is not electric, it is minus 13, so just keep that in mind. A key thing to note about forward neutral 3 is that it does track to Reina's weak side slightly. However, it is completely weak to sidestep right, unless you delay the timing. But then the opponent has plenty of time to block. With that being said, CD3 covers this weakness too. Another useful neutral tool is forward 3+4. It has 3 active frames, knocks down on normal hit, and is a full launcher on counter hit. This move also wall splats. Then of course you have Electric Wind Godfist, plus 5 on block, pretty much no whiff recovery, launches on normal hit, Useful for pressure, keep out, doing your laundry, pretty much everything you need it to do. Down 2 is also a good move to use in neutral. A 15 frame mid elbow that forces the opponent into crouch on hit or on block and gives a guaranteed follow-up on counter hit. Another very useful move in neutral is forward 4. It is quite slow at 19 frames, but it is +2 on block and leaves the opponent in crouch. And if it hits a crouching opponent, she is +13, which guarantees a down forward 1-2 or a Demon's Breath. Another good move to throw out in neutral is 3+4. This is a pretty long range, low crushing move. So if the opponent comes in with the low, you can catch them with this. It also has an extension in 3+4-4, which counter hit launches in case they try to whiff punish you a bit too early. A couple of moves that are also useful in neutral are forward 2-3 and back 4. Not necessarily in that order. Forward 2-3 is very good at controlling the pace of the match a little bit for opponents who like to mash upon seeing you whiff something, because the second hit transitions into Sentai at +13 when you hold forward on counter hit. This of course means you have the choice between Heat Engage or Sentai 2. And then back 4 is an 18 frame high crushing high that gives you a guaranteed CD3 on normal hit or a full launch on counter hit. Very useful against opponents who are jab happy. It is also useful in the Mishima and Steve matchup because they like to use electrics or back 1 specifically, so run up back 4 is a pretty effective move to counter that. Near the wall, this also gives you a nice wall splat into a clean wall combo. Now when it comes to Reina's wall game as well, a very useful move is standing 4. The reason I say this is because standing 4 does have some tracking to Reina's weak side and will often wall splat opponents who are trying to step her. This does not apply to the opponent sidestepping right. Near the wall, sidestep 4 and forward 4 are pretty good too, but do note that they are quite slow, so you should mix in your fast pokes like down forward 1. Another one of Reina's useful moves is down forward 4. It's a 15 frame mid kick, just -4 on block. However, it is part of a string. This string is down forward 4-2-3, and it has 2 different counter hit properties. Firstly, if the second hit counter hits, the whole string becomes guaranteed and you can run up CD3 for free. Now if only the last hit counter hits, which is often the case with players who mash, you get a full combo. 2-2 is also a very useful option near the wall because the second hit tends to clip players who like to sidewalk. Depending on the angle, this might also lead to a wall splat. And then of course, you can't talk about Reina's neutral game without talking about 4-4-2. This is a 12 frame mid, however do note that it comes out of a dash, so I believe the fastest it can come out is either 13 or 14 frames. This move is a war crime, and I didn't want to cover this first because I know that it will be abused, but use it. 4-4-2 is -9 on block by itself, but if you transition into Sentai, it is +2, which is a free mix-up for Reina. Do note that the risk reward for this mix-up is in the opponent's favor, and the best that Reina gets off of it is a 42 damage wall splat. But if the opponent guesses right on pretty much any of her options, she gets launched. I will talk more about Sentai in the specific section for her stances, which is coming up soon. One thing that I would recommend everyone does is to practice hit confirming 4-4-2. A very easy way to do this is to set the dummy first action to random block and the second option to block all. And basically only let 4-4-2 send 3 rip once you visually see it land on hit. Like that. As of Season 2, forward 4-2 send 2 is also guaranteed on hit as Reina is +13. Reina's forward 3 is also a pretty decent move. Comes out at 20 frames and leaves the opponent at -3 in crouch. However, I don't find much utility for this in neutral when forward 2 into send 3 does pretty much everything you need it to do and is also faster. However, Its utility increases when Reina already has heat activated, because forward forward 2 into Sen 3 heat dash only gives you a guaranteed follow-up, while forward forward 3 heat dash gives you a full combo. Since Reina is quite linear, you're going to want to make use of her homing moves too. In that case, from neutral she has standing 3, which is a high, 18 frames, high crushes. However, you are mainly going to use the extensions, that is to say 3-2, which is -9 on block, but it is a high so can be ducked. If the opponent ducks, you mix it up with 3-4, which is -14 on block, but will of course catch duckers, and also is a counter hit launcher. 3-2 by itself is also a counter hit launcher if the first hit lands on counter hit. Last but not least for this section, we have Reina's back 2, which is a 16 frame homing mid, does 14 damage, and is -9 on block. However, the main purpose of this move is to pretty much annoy your opponent and just stop their stepping attempts, so that you can open them up to some of Reina's more linear moves. Now to move on to Reina's heat. She has a very strong heat game. First of all, 2 of her unsafe strings now get a safe extension. So there's 3 + 4, 4, 4, and there is 3, 4, 4. As you can see, they both do a chunky bit of damage. Both of these moves are only -8 and do a chunky amount of chip damage on block too. 3 + 4, 4, 4 is also an incredible whiff punisher, as it has a very long range and essentially becomes safe. If the opponent does try to step, they are very likely to get clipped by it too. Lastly, both of these extensions trigger wall gimmicks, so incredibly powerful indeed. Then of course in Season 2 we got down to 1+2. 45 damage on normal hit, +7 on block into Unsoku Stance, and it also wall splats cleanly. This move is especially powerful after a heat engage because it locks down the opponent's options to pretty much just stand block. I have Elisa set to Power Crush here, and as you can see, it beats Power Crush. Any movement attempts aside from backdash will get clipped. However, do note that characters with particularly strong backdash like Jack may be able to backdash away from it. Of course, if you just do down 2, 1+2 all the time, the opponent is just going to eat a bit of chip damage in a minor mix, right? However, because they're so scared of ducking, they're open to Hell Sweep, and in Heaven's Wrath, she gets access to down 3 + 4, which is a move that triggers floor gimmicks and does 35 damage. Reina's Heat Smash is on the slower side at 21 frames, however, its real strength lies in its range. So anyone who tells you this Heat Smash is useless is just straight up wrong. I've often found myself in this situation where the opponent has low HP and they haven't used their heat yet. And they think, I'm out of range of forward forward 2, I'll be fine, I can just quickly pop heat. But they tend to underestimate the range of Reina's Heat Smash, and this happens. So I will say that the best application of Reina's Heat Smash is as a whiff punisher. One last thing to note about Reina's heat is that her Heaven's Wrath stance now becomes a parry. So moves that were previously punishable when she transitions into Heaven's Wrath become a parry for punches and kicks. However, if the opponent has done their homework, they will know that even if they block while standing 4-4, they will always hop kick, which will beat the parry. Jump status moves are the best way to beat raw Heaven's Wrath, because unlike normal parries, where throws become unbreakable, you can still break throws out of Heaven's Wrath's parry. Now we move on to Reina's stances. First of all, I'll start with Sentai, access manually by pressing forward 3. From here she has a number of options. Her fastest is a homing high heat engager, Sentai 3, which comes out at 12 frames. Then she has Sen 2, a Power Crush in Sen 1, 2, which can be charged up by inputting a quarter circle forward before you do 2. She has an unbreakable throw by pressing either 1+3 or 2+4 out of Sentai. She has Sen 3+4, which is a +4 on hit low that high crushes and is homing. She also has Sen 1+2, 14 frames, 30 damage, and leads to a guaranteed Wrath 2 on hit. Her transitions into Sentai are forward forward 2, hold forward, forward 2-3, hold forward, back 1-1-3, hold forward, and from her stances like Unsoku and Heaven's Wrath by pressing forward 3 out of each stance. And then of course forward neutral 4 on hit as well at +3. Do note that forward forward 2 into Sen is the only transition that is plus on block. The rest are either neutral, such as Wrath 1 or back 1-1-3, or negative, such as forward 2-3 on block. She also has Sen 4, which low crushes for about 4 or 5 frames, and is +4 on block, but is of course very vulnerable to being stepped. Off of forward forward 2, Sen 4 will beat down jabs and give you a guaranteed follow-up, or the power crush as well. Do note that against Yoshimitsu, transitioning into Sen on block is ill-advised, because Reina cannot block during Sen, and even if you do forward forward 2 into Sen into nothing, she still gets flashed. Your only option is the power crush, and when she is negative upon transitioning into Sen, the flash even beats power crush. So if the Yoshimitsu is on autopilot, your best bet is to do forward forward 2 into nothing, bait flash, and launch. One thing about Sen and forward forward 2 in particular is that you should have a keen eye for when forward forward 2 is either whiffed or is blocked. The reason I say this is because a lot of players might see forward forward 2 whiff and think that they can punish, but I tend to rob a lot of people by doing whiff forward forward 2 into the Sen power crush, which often catches retaliation attempts that are too slow. Sentai can also be useful in neutral, as you have a very long range low off of forward 3 into Sen 3+4. With that being said, I don't often go into Sentai unless I'm at a range like this, because Reina is vulnerable during her Sentai animation. Do note that Sen 1+2 is technically -14 on block, because she is unable to block in Heaven's Wrath, and it takes 8 frames to cancel the stance. Kazuya's Electric here will not punish -13, but it will punish -14. So, if we try Sen 1+2 into cancel, you see I get clipped. With that being said, outside of heat, the only 100% guaranteed punish is a move that is 11 frames or faster. This is because Reina has a power crush out of Heaven's Wrath, and it will beat even 12 frame moves. Kazuya's back 1-2 is 11 frames, and as you can see here, it beats the power crush. The situation becomes slightly more complicated in heat, because now this loses to Heaven's Wrath's parry. And remember I said with Heaven's Wrath, your best bet is airborne moves. However, this means that Reina has enough time to cancel Heaven's Wrath and block any airborne move attempts. Off of 1-1-2, because it is +11, Sentai 3 and Sentai 2 both become completely uninterruptible even by parries, because I believe the fastest parry in this game activates at 3 frames. So in general, off of 1-1-2, your safe option is Sentai 2, as it only leaves Reina at -4 on block. The only option off of 1-1-2 into Sen that can effectively be walked is Sentai 4, so don't get too greedy with your plus frames and chip damage. Up next we have Heaven's Wrath, which is accessed manually by pressing down 1+2. Most of the time, you will be transitioning into Heaven's Wrath at +6. This is going to be off of your Hell Sweep, and off of her 11 frame while standing punish while standing 4-4. You can also transition into Heaven's Wrath off of Sen 2 at +8, and down forward 4-2 at +8 on hit. Do note that the Heaven's Wrath transition can be delayed, and this does affect the frame data. However, this is not such a big deal. As you can see, I delayed my Heaven's Wrath transition a bit. I'm +6. If I delayed a lot, I'm only +2. For moves on block, you have Running 4 at +8, and Wrath 3-4 on block, also at +8. Her options from Heaven's Wrath are Wrath 1-4, which is her fastest. Wrath 1 is 12 frame homing high. At the wall, this provides a wall splat. Your second fastest option is Wrath 2, which is a heat engager that is safe on block, but is vulnerable to sidestep right. Then you have Wrath 3-4, which is quite slow but low crushes pretty early. And on block, it does a chunky amount of chip damage into +8. If you don't transition into Heaven's Wrath by holding down, it is still +6 on block 2. Then you have Wrath 1+2, which is a Power Crush, -13 on block, and Wall Splats. Then we have Wrath down 4-3, which is -16 on block. However, its main utility comes in the fact that it is natural on counter hit, and if the opponent presses into the second hit, it is a counter hit launcher. Do note that the first hit is -15 on block, so be very careful. Then you have an Unbreakable Throw from Heaven's Wrath, homing, does 20 damage out in the open, but against the wall, 35. Then of course, as I previously mentioned, in Heat she gets access to Wrath down 3+4. This was her old Heat Smash and activates floor gimmicks. She also has Wrath 3+4, which is a knockdown on hit, and is 0 on block, dealing some chip damage and forces the opponent into crouch. So what is the significance of these frames? At +6, because Wrath 1 is 12 frames, it becomes a frame trap even for power crushes. On counter hit, this is especially devastating for the opponent because you can get 68 damage off of this. But of course, your opponent is not going to want to power crush all the time. However, it's very useful for catching things like heat bursts, which will beat Wrath 3-4. In general, if the opponent wants to avoid the mid options, they will want to sidestep right block. I've set Kazuya to do exactly that, and let me show you what this looks like. Wrath 2, cleanly evaded. Wrath 1+2, blocked. Wrath 3+4, blocked. This situation changes slightly at +8 because suddenly, most characters are not able to step her effectively to the right. However, characters with strong sidesteps will still be able to step and launch Wrath 2. Do note that since Wrath 1 and Wrath 2 are punches, they are vulnerable to punch parries or punch sabakis. So you don't always have to use Wrath 1-4. One thing to note about Wrath 1 is that when you transition into Sentai on hit, it is +12, so Sen 3 is guaranteed. But do note that Sen 2 is not. Wrath 1 can also transition into Unsoku at +12 on hit, or 0 on block by holding up or down when Wrath 1 connects. On counter hit, Wrath 1 leaves Reina at +14, but the opponent is crouching, so only mid moves are guaranteed. This situation changes slightly if you transition into any of her stances. So if you go into Unsoku, she's +18, which means that Unsoku 4 is guaranteed for a heat engage. However, when you transition into Sentai, she gets a full 68 damage off of this. One thing I would recommend you practice is specifically Wrath 1 into her Sen transition. Set player counter to shuffle. Then you want to counter hit confirm Wrath 1 into Sen 1+2 or Wrath 1 into Sen 3, depending on whether it's a counter hit or not. It should look something like this. Do note that near the wall, if you transition into Sen off of Wrath 1 counter hit, Sen 1-2 is also guaranteed. Heaven's Wrath can also be cancelled by inputting down forward and holding back. You can also go into Sen directly from Heaven's Wrath, which might enable you to do some tomfoolery. Last but not least, we have her Unsoku Stance. There are two ways to access it from neutral. You either press back 3 to go into Unsoku Gen, or up 3 or down 3 to go into Unsoku Ko. Now what's the difference here? With Unsoku Gen, it is more evasive since she does a little back step. However, she cannot block during Unsoku. The same applies to Unsoku Ko, however, she does have a punch parry from this, as you can see here. I will go into more detail about this punch parry a bit later. Her only truly unique move from Unsoku is Unsoku 4, which is a long-range, safe, mid-heat engager that high crushes for majority of its frames. Other moves from Unsoku are Unsoku 3, which is essentially just forward neutral 3, and Unsoku down 4, which is just essentially forward neutral 4. Unsoku can also either cancel into a crouch dash by holding down forward, or into Sentai by pressing forward 3. One thing to note about this crouch dash cancel is that it is indeed a crouch dash, and so she has access to all of her Mishima tools from Unsoku Stance. If you time it right, you can even get the electric versions of these moves. Very useful for tricking the opponent. The same does apply to Heaven's Wrath's crouch dash. However, I have been unsuccessful in getting the electric version of her moves to come out from here. Since Unsoku can also cancel into Sentai, it's also quite useful for some more trickery. Something to note about Unsoku's crouch dash transition is that Reina's alignment shifts slightly. As you can see, she's sort of moving around Kazuya here, so just keep that in mind as your electrics might whiff. To make this a bit more consistent, you can go into Unsoku Ko towards Reina's right, and that way it sort of covers her weak side a little bit. With Unsoku Ko and Unsoku Gen, if you tap down forward during the stance startup, Reina will not cancel into a crouch dash and will instead cancel into a side step. This allows for a bit more trickery and an interesting movement option in rapidly cancelling Unsoku Gen, like so. I have yet to use that practically in matches, but it's pretty cool. Now what about the frames? So her fastest move from Unsoku is Unsoku 3, which comes out at 16 to 17 frames. Second fastest is Unsoku 4, which comes out at 18 frames. What this means is that at +7, if the opponent tries to jab or down jab, they will get counter hit launched by Unsoku 3. Now Unsoku 4 does high crush for majority of its frames except for the last 2. What this means is that when done on immediate timing at +7, it can be jabbed. In heat, down to 1+2 has exactly the same frame data on block at +7. For the opponent, sidestep right block is not such a bad option as it will evade a lot of things. Unsoku down 4 will sometimes clip, but this is inconsistent. Unsoku 4 does have a tendency to catch people sidestepping because it has 2 active frames, but in practice I've noticed it gets stepped quite frequently, so beware. Also, since her fastest move from Unsoku is 16 frames, this means that she is vulnerable to Power Crush and Rage Art. So if the opponent is in Rage, it is advised to simply cancel your Unsoku Stance to either bait Rage Art or just to be safer in general. Now, there are 2 moves that I didn't mention earlier that can also be accessed from Unsoku. That being forward 1+2 and her forward 3+4. Right? Forward 1+2 is a bit of a mini stance because she has more options out of it aside from the unsafe mid. She can do forward 1+2 3 for a launch punishable low. She can do forward 1+2 into up forward for an empty jump. Or she can do forward 1+2 up forward 3 for running 3. Or forward 1+2 up forward 4 for running 4. To access this from Unsoku, anytime you enter Unsoku, whether it's Unsoku Ko or Unsoku Gen, just press 1+2 and all the options are available to you. The second move is forward 3+4, which by itself is a short little roll, -14 on block, and it's a counter hit launcher. A special thing about this move is that it has 2 states of charge. First of all, there's uncharged, which comes out at 43 frames and high crushes for majority of its startup. And then you have full charge, which is a guard break. Leaves her at +10 for a guaranteed 112 or 122. In heat, this move gains a safe extension, similar to 344 and 3+444. Just by inputting 4 after the first kick connects. This move is especially devastating in heat against particularly passive opponents because the guard break guarantees 25 damage into a clean wall splat. To cancel this move, you just hold down back at any point during the animation. However, do note that she will only stop rolling very quickly if you cancel it immediately, or if you wait, then she rolls at least twice, and you can go up to full charge and cancel it into crouch. To access this move from Unsoku, either Unsoku Ko or Unsoku Gen, just press 3+4, and all your options become available. There is one strange thing about this move though. When you do it off of down to 1+2 into Unsoku, if you press 3+4, Reina does Unsoku 3, so just keep that in mind. This does not apply to her transition into Unsoku off of 1-2-2, as you can see here. One last thing to note about Unsoku 4 is that it can also be cancelled. by holding down back during its startup. Another transition into Unsoku that I don't have much use for but can be used for trickery is off of forward 2 by itself. Forward 2 by itself, if you hold up or down, she will transition into Unsoku Ko. On block, this transition is neutral, so she is open to counterattacks. Now I will talk about Reina's parries. So she has two. She has Fusatsujin and she has Tatenashi. I'll start with Fusatsujin, which is exclusively a punch parry. This is accessed either by tapping forward. You see she does a little motion with her hands. She has 5 frames where she is able to parry an opponent's punch. Alternatively, Unsoku Ko has some punch parry frames which will transition into her Fusatsujin parry. A successful parry looks like this. Now she is plus 10 and forced into a crouch dash. But this frame data can be a bit deceptive. In truth, if you cancel this crouch dash, Reina can actually be plus 13. Now I have Jin set to jab and then block for an extended period of time, just to cover this little animation so that it doesn't mess with my explanation. But you can crouch cancel this and do a 1-1-2, or crouch cancel 1-2-2, and this is a bit more difficult, but crouch cancel 2-2-1 is also guaranteed. As you can see there. Crouch cancel down forward 1-2 is possible, but because it's a just frame, I don't recommend going for it. In all honesty, Fusatsujin is a parry that I trigger by accident because of this little forward neutral parry animation. Because of this, I recommend you acquaint yourself with seeing this animation and crouch cancelling into 1-1-2. You can also use it as an opportunity to mix the opponent by holding down forward and going into crouch dash, because she does have all her options from there. However, I don't recommend this because Hell Sweep is launch punishable and yada yada yada. Up next we have Tatenashi, which is a strong parry that activates at frame 3. What this means is that even hop kicks can be parried. Do note, Reina is forced into Heaven's Wrath off of this parry, and she takes 10 points of recoverable damage. What this means is that outside of heat, for multi-hit strings, Reina is vulnerable since she cannot block during Heaven's Wrath. She can power crush in some instances, but usually the recoverable health isn't worth it. So with this parry in particular, you have to be very clever with how you use it. With that being said, as opposed to getting just a 12 frame punish, if you have a read on certain moves, you can get a heat engage. In some instances, if you have a read on the opponent's timing and their move choice, you can turn plus on block moves into launch punishable moves. See, that said punish. In heat, this parry becomes slightly more useful as long as the second hit of a multi-hit string is grounded. As you can see here, because the second hit is airborne and Heaven's Wrath is a weak parry, I ate it. However, with a move like this, where the second hit will clip me, when I am in heat, it's a different story. Something else to note is that the 10 recoverable damage she takes from a successful Tatenashi parry is recovered upon landing the Heaven's Wrath parry. I would say the best use for Tatenashi is to parry multi-hit strings that opponents generally like to heat dash off of. With Tatenashi, you will have to check which of her options from Heaven's Wrath can punish what. So for instance, you parry a jab, you get nothing. At best, you get a Heaven's Wrath mix for free essentially, but I've found that this isn't particularly useful. However, with moves like this, you can even get Wrath 2 guaranteed. This is especially useful in heat to get a heat dash into a full combo. Of course, since Tatenashi is a parry, it is vulnerable to throws, lows, and reversal breaks like Paul's Death Fist in heat, every single heat smash, or rage arts. Fusatsujin is a parry and can thus be countered by anti-parry methods such as throws. It is unbreakable. So if you're ever just moving forward, you jab, and then suddenly you're not able to break a throw, blame Fusatsujin. Reina also has an above average throw game. In addition to her generic throws and her up forward 1+2, she also has her own quarter circle back forward 2, which is a 2 break. Although this throw does wall splat, there is not enough time for Reina to recover and convert into a combo. However, this does activate wall gimmicks. If your opponent's back is to a wall gimmick, it is much better to go for Reina's 2 throw to activate it, as opposed to her 1+2, because her 2 throw does not side switch, while her up forward 1+2 does. Her generic 1 throw also activates floor gimmicks. If your back is to the wall, it is advisable to go for either up forward 1+2 for a side switch, or her generic 2 throw, which also switches sides on throw break. For Reina's back turn punishment, you have a number of options. First of all, her full 2 string is guaranteed, so this is 222 and QCF2 for a little bit of extra damage. If you step a slow move and end up at the opponent's back 113 into Sen is also a very powerful option. Now let me show you why. If after the Sen transition they do not duck, the back turn throw becomes guaranteed, leading to a chunky 92 damage. If the opponent does duck, of course the throw will whiff since it's a high. However, this opens them up to her mids. Again, 92 damage, just with a little bit of recoverable. If the opponent is a bit far away, a very good option is forward forward 2 into Sen 1+2 into Wrath 3+4. A personal favorite of mine, because it's also fast, is 1 2 3 4. Only 42 damage. However, near the wall, this can create some very interesting situations. You see, pretty much a clean wall splash. After a heat dash, 1+2 is a very good option, especially near the end of rounds, because it will clip any movement attempts. Near the wall, it will also wall splash. And for anything except Power Crush and Standing Block, it wins. This of course includes Rage Arts. A note on Reina's Stomp: when the opponent is face up, both hits are guaranteed. However, when the opponent is face down, they can tech roll after the first hit. So your best bet in this scenario is either to CD3 or just to do down 4 by itself. A note on while standing 3+4 is that on counter hit, the pushback is reduced. This allows for interactions like this if your opponent likes to jab after landing a heat burst. One thing that is pretty much guaranteed to happen when you play Reina is that you will be in a weird position. That is to say, you might find yourself randomly backturned. In that case, Backturned 4 is an incredibly powerful robbery tool. It is a normal hit launcher, very similar to full crouch down forward 4, except of course it comes from backturn. Do note that this move is -14 on block, so beware patient opponents. I also have an example from one of my ranked games where this helped me gain points to get to God of Destruction. I'll show that to you now. If you are at a very specific distance from the wall and you land a non-launching heat dash, you can still convert into a wall combo like this. If for some reason you are crouched and the opponent is back turned, do note that full crouch down forward 3 does not launch. However, full crouch down forward 4 does. If you happen to get this launch, this is the combo that I like to do. For consistency. Now when it comes to Reina's combo game, first I will go over Reina's combo tools and a few basic sequences that you should practice in order to maximize her combo damage and wall carry, and then I will go into the combos themselves. The first of which is this sequence right here. Forward 2-3 into Sen, into down forward into Sen. Like with all other Sen transitions, she will go into Sen after down forward 1 if you hold forward after inputting the move. To practice this, you should do down forward 2, forward 2-3 into Sen into down forward 1. But the most important is that it says 4-hit combo. As a couple of examples of how you'll get this wrong is if you press down forward 1 too early, she'll do the Sen power crush instead. Otherwise, you might do down forward 1 a bit too late after the opponent has already hit the ground. Down forward 4-2-3 is a very reliable tornado in combos and is generally used when the situation is a bit weird, like when the opponent gets hit on a sidewall. If you want to be completely safe, back 4 is an incredibly good tornado move because even though it's a high, its hitbox is incredibly low and will often tornado in cases where down forward 4-2-3 will miss. Most of the time in combos, if you have tornado available, you will either use Sen 2 or Sen 1+2. Her strong aerial tail spins are while standing 3-4 and running 4. You can do while standing 3-4 in two ways, and both have different applications. So firstly, you can do a crouch dash, go to neutral, and just press 3-4, and it will come out. Otherwise, Reina has a command crouch dash off of down forward 3, and you just press down forward 3, return to neutral, and press 3-4. This one is more useful when you need the while standing 3-4 to come out quickly. Running 4 as a strong aerial tailspin is generally a high execution but high damage option, as you have very little time to do it properly after doing Sen 1+2 for instance. Up forward 1 can also be used in combos every now and then, but do note that it goes straight into Heaven's Wrath and thus you will have to cancel by holding down forward. As a very basic combo, you can do this off of her down forward 2 or Wind God Fist. The combo off of forward 3+4 is slightly different. What you're going to want to do is, when it lands, you sidestep right and immediately do forward 2-3, no delay. After counter hit CD3, you're going to want to do a combo like this. Now, a combo route that I recommend, because you can do it off of virtually any launcher, down forward 2, electric wind god fist, full crouch down forward 4, or even full crouch down forward 3, is the following. Note that I do not recommend skipping this additional down forward 1 here, as it reduces the consistency of the combo a bit. Like you see there, the last hit whiffs, but if I included that down forward 1, the combo would have connected. Off of moves that tornado off of the first hit, I recommend this combo from Season 1, so you'll do this off of Bag 4 or Reina's Hot Move. It does decent damage and has pretty good wall carry too. Another combo to do off of her single hit tornadoes is the following. Do note that the second strong aerial tailspin, Reina has to crouch dash quite deep for it to connect. The combo that I staple off of electric is the following. Now, on days when my execution is a bit low, I will not do running 4 and I will instead substitute it for while standing 3-4. In order to make this combo just a little bit more consistent, instead of dash up down forward 4, which does 3 more damage, you can do dash up down forward 1. Also note that the combo ender, Reina again has to dash a little bit deep to ensure that both hits connect. As long as the combo doesn't have too many hits, you can substitute while standing 3-4 as a combo ender for up forward 3+4, 1+2. Off of full crouch down forward 4, this combo route does a little bit more damage than just doing forward 2 into Sen 3. Do note that this route is only consistent on full crouch down forward 4 and not on full crouch down forward 3. When it comes to doing running 4 into tornado, the only advice that I can provide is that you have to be really quick, and a lot of the time you'll end up doing forward 4 instead. So you'll cancel Heaven's Wrath with down forward and then immediately input running 4. You just have to be fast. There's not really a trick to it. Even Yagami doesn't recommend going for it that often. If ever you think your combo ender will whiff, just go for 222 QCF2. For combos that are off axis, I recommend this route. And also note that I delay my forward 2-3 here, because every now and then, if I'm too fast, then my tornado will whiff. If you do a 3-hit tornado directly after a launch, you can do this high execution combo. If your opponent is relatively low on HP and you haven't used your heat yet, this kind of combo will guarantee the kill. Obviously that combo takes a bit of execution, but the main takeaway is after a long combo, if you do Heat Burst, I would suggest you do forward 4-3 into Heat Dash into her Blue Spark Stomp for max damage. This also takes scaling into account. Here are a couple of combo examples off of a Heat Dash. Here's an example of how to end a long combo after you've used a gimmick. Once your combo reaches the wall, for consistency, I recommend doing down forward 1-1 into 1+2. For a clean wall splat and for pure damage, I suggest doing this combo. Now, a combo that has very good damage and Oki is also quite difficult, but with practice it will come. And that combo is this. The key here is in doing back 1-1-3, but you delay the second hit just enough, such that the opponent hits the wall at a low slump. Because if you do it too fast, it whiffs. From here, you can go into Heaven's Wrath for a mix, or you can just stay standing. I prefer to stay standing because if the opponent toe kicks, I can duck and launch, or if the opponent spring kicks, I can block and launch. This mix is especially disgusting once the opponent stops doing toe kick or spring kick, because if they simply tech roll, they are forced to guess between a mid and an unbreakable throw. The same applies for a combo like this. And if you notice the opponent simply stays on the ground, Wrath 3+4 hits them grounded. In some cases, when you use Sen 1+2 as the tornado, Reina is left in Wrath and you've already used a couple of your wall hits. In which case, the combo at the wall is quite simple. Just do Wrath 4, 2-2, quarter circle forward 1+2. Like so. Of course, if you do use Reina's Sen 1+2 as a bound, remember to cancel out of Wrath in order to get your wall combo. When you land Reina's 3-2 on counter hit, do note that the second hit basically counts as your second scaled hit in the combo, so you will have to modify it slightly. I like to use this combo. And that is going to be it from me for this Reina guide. This is my first time ever making a guide like this, so there is obviously room for improvement, in which case, please drop a comment below, and I will be sure to implement it in my Season 3 Reina guide once that drops. With that being said, I hope that you found this guide useful, and that you were able to level up your Reina game even just a little bit. Until next time, have a good one.